Imagine an empire so powerful, its influence shaped the entire world. From the rise of Augustus to the fall of Rome in 476 AD, this is the story of ambition, conquest, and betrayal that changed history forever. The sun rose over the 7 hills of Rome, casting golden light on the bustling forum, where merchants shouted their wares, senators debated with fiery intensity, and citizens hurried along stone streets, unaware that they were living in the heart of an empire that would one day rule the known world. Among the crowd, a young boy named Marcus ran between stalls, his eyes wide with curiosity as he listened to the elders recount tales of past kings and heroes. He had always dreamed of glory, though he knew nothing of the magnitude that awaited his city. Across the city, in the shadow of the capital, a man in a toga, Cicero, spoke passionately to a gathering of senators. His words carried authority and wisdom, yet even he could not foresee the tide of ambition that would sweep through Rome, changing it forever. Far beyond the city walls, a legion marched in perfect formation, dust rising from the roads as their sandals pounded the earth. The soldiers were led by a man of iron will, Augustus, whose eyes held a vision of Rome unlike any the Republic had ever known. He had survived political assassinations, civil wars, and betrayal to become the first emperor, a ruler who would bring stability after decades of chaos. His general, Titus, rode alongside him, a loyal companion and warrior, understanding that the fate of the entire Mediterranean rested on their discipline and courage. They spoke little, for in silence the weight of strategy and destiny hung between them. Yet their unspoken bond was stronger than any words could convey. Back in the Forum, Marcus watched as a procession of senators and priests paraded through the streets, their ceremonial garb gleaming in the morning sun. He imagined himself among them one day, speaking with authority, making decisions that would shape history. A street performer caught his attention, juggling knives with astonishing skill, drawing laughter and applause from the crowd. Marcus laughed too, but his mind wandered. How could Rome, so alive and full of life today, ever fall? The thought was fleeting, replaced by the excitement of the day, the smell of fresh bread, and the clanging of the blacksmith's hammer in the distance. In the Senate, Cicero paused mid-speech, sensing a shift in the air. Rumors had reached him of a rising general, Caesar, whose ambition threatened the fragile balance of power. Senators whispered behind closed doors, plotting and scheming, each driven by fear, envy, or loyalty. Cicero knew that Rome's destiny was hanging by a thread, yet he could only speak in hope that wisdom would prevail. Outside, the city thrummed with life, unaware that the streets they walked on would soon be stained with the blood of civil war, betrayal, and ambition that no man could control. Meanwhile, in a distant province, a young woman named Livia watched soldiers march past her village. She had grown up hearing stories of Rome's conquests, tales of bravery and cruelty alike. Her father, a veteran of countless battles, taught her how to read the signs of war, the movement of troops, the strategy of generals, the discipline that separated victory from defeat. Livia's eyes sparkled with determination. She would not be a passive observer of history. She longed to understand the empire, to play a role in its shaping, though she knew that in a world ruled by men and steel, women's influence was subtle, yet often decisive. As Augustus consolidated power, his mind never rested. Each decision he made was calculated, weighing the loyalty of senators, the morale of his legions, and the loyalty of the people. He understood that Rome was more than an army or a city. It was an idea, a vision of civilization, law, and order that could either endure for centuries or crumble under the weight of greed and corruption. By his side, Titus reminded him of the human cost, of the men who marched, fought, and died for the glory of Rome. Augustus listened, Yet his gaze remained fixed on the horizon, imagining an empire stretching from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Germania, an empire whose shadow would loom over history long after he was gone. Back in the Forum, Marcus followed a group of scholars discussing the stories of Romulus and Remus, the legendary founders. He could see the passion in their faces, the pride of a people who believed their city was destined for greatness. But as he listened, he sensed an undercurrent of tension. Senators argued over land, wealth, and influence, the gap between the powerful and the ordinary citizens widening with each passing day. Marcus did not fully understand politics yet, but he felt the weight of Rome's destiny pressing upon him, an invisible hand guiding the lives of millions toward triumph and tragedy. The sun climbed higher, and the streets of Rome grew busier. Merchants called out to potential customers, children played in alleys, and soldiers patrolled the walls, ever vigilant. The empire was alive, dynamic, unstoppable, or so it seemed. Behind closed doors, conspiracies were formed, alliances broken, and power seized with ruthless precision. Each character, Marcus, Livia, Cicero, Augustus, Titus, played a role in a grand narrative, their lives intertwined with the fate of a civilization that would define an era. Night fell, and the city's torches flickered, casting long shadows across the Forum. Marcus returned home, exhausted yet exhilarated, dreaming of the day he might witness Rome's greatest moments firsthand. Livia studied maps by candlelight, tracing the paths of legions and imagining herself at the heart of campaigns that would decide the empire's future. Augustus, in his palace, reviewed reports and correspondence, calculating moves that would strengthen his rule. Cicero pondered speeches and strategies, aware that his words might influence history or be silenced forever. And in the provinces, distant yet connected, ordinary citizens lived their lives under the vast shadow of Rome, each contributing unknowingly to the story that would echo through the ages. From the bustling streets to the distant provinces, from the ambitions of generals to the dreams of ordinary citizens, the Roman Empire was more than a city or a government. It was a living, breathing entity, shaping and being shaped by those who dared to step into its vast narrative. And this is where our story begins, with people, power, and the inexorable march of history from Augustus, the first emperor, to the fall of Rome in 476 AD. Every triumph, every betrayal, every conquest would leave its mark, and every life, whether celebrated or forgotten, would become a thread in the tapestry of an empire that changed the world forever. The city of Rome never slept. Even as dawn broke over the Tiber, whispers of unrest stirred in the Senate. Caesar, a name that had already begun to echo through the streets and villas of the elite, was on the rise. Ambition burned in his eyes like fire, a hunger for power that few could comprehend. He had returned from Gaul victorious, his legions loyal not to the Senate or the Republic, but to him. Cicero watched with growing unease as the balance of power shifted, sensing that the Republic's fragile order teetered on the brink of collapse. He spoke urgently to fellow senators, warning of Caesar's growing influence, yet many turned deaf ears toward his caution, blinded by their own greed or fear. Meanwhile, Marcus had grown older, no longer the wide-eyed boy running through the Forum. He now walked the streets with a sense of purpose, listening carefully to the conversations around him. Every debate, every whisper of conspiracy felt like a story unfolding in real time. He watched soldiers march with banners raised high, and he felt the pulse of Rome itself, strong and unstoppable yet fragile in its own way. He began to understand that history was not written in books alone. It was lived, fought for, and sometimes stolen by those bold enough to seize it. In the provinces, Livia felt the first tremors of change. Reports arrived of Caesar crossing the Rubicon, a river whose name would forever be etched in history. The phrase "alia iactu isti" reverberated across the empire. The die was cast. Livia's father shook his head in disbelief, warning that civil war was inevitable. Families were torn apart, loyalties tested, and cities that once thrived under Roman law now feared the shadow of armies moving through their streets. Yet amid the chaos, Livia saw the courage of ordinary people, their resilience shaping the empire's destiny in ways the emperors and generals could never fully command. Caesar's march toward power was relentless. The Senate, paralyzed by fear and indecision, could only watch as their authority crumbled. Cicero's speeches, once influential, now fell on ears hardened by self-preservation. He argued for reason, for tradition, for the Republic, but the tides of ambition were too strong. Caesar's charisma drew followers like moths to flame. Men who had sworn allegiance to the Senate now knelt at his feet, willing to risk everything for a place in his rising empire. Among them, a young officer named Brutus wrestled with his loyalty. He admired Caesar yet feared the concentration of power, understanding that the ideals of Rome might be sacrificed for the ambition of one man. As Rome burned with political tension, Marcus found himself swept up in events he had never imagined. He watched from the streets as armies clashed and banners fell, citizens fleeing the violence that had once seemed unimaginable. He saw friends join the legions, never to return, and families divided by allegiances to Caesar or Pompey. Each day, the streets told stories of heroism and tragedy, and Marcus began to understand the cost of ambition, the human price of empire. Amid the chaos, Caesar's rise reached its pinnacle. On the Ides of March, in the heart of the Senate, betrayal struck. Brutus and a coalition of conspirators plunged knives into Caesar, the man who had reshaped the world. The air was thick with shock and fear as the Senate chamber became a theater of history in motion. Cicero, who had long feared such an outcome, watched silently, understanding that even the death of a single man could not stop the tide of history. Marcus, witnessing the horror from a distance, felt a mixture of awe and terror. He realized that the story of Rome was as much about the fall of great men as it was about their rise. Following Caesar's assassination, the empire spiraled into civil war once again. Octavian, later known as Augustus, emerged from the shadows, determined to restore order. He navigated the treacherous waters of politics with a combination of cunning, patience, and ruthlessness. With Mark Antony and Lepidus at his side, he forged the second triumvirate, seeking vengeance for Caesar and control of the empire. Battles raged across the Mediterranean, cities were besieged, and the fate of millions hung in the balance. Livia, witnessing the movement of troops through her province, felt the full weight of war pressing down on ordinary citizens. She tended to the wounded, listened to their stories, and realized that the empire was built not only by generals, but by countless unnamed lives shaped by the tides of conquest. In Rome, Marcus became an apprentice to a scribe, learning the art of record, keeping, and storytelling. Through him, we glimpse the daily lives of citizens amidst empire-shaping events. He chronicled debates, witnessed trials, and followed soldiers returning from distant campaigns. Each record he kept was a testament to Rome's grandeur and its fragility, a reflection of power wielded wisely or recklessly, shaping the destiny of generations. Meanwhile, Augustus consolidated his power quietly, carefully, avoiding the fate of Caesar by presenting himself not as a dictator, but as a restorer of the Republic. Senators who once plotted against him were either placated or removed. The city, weary from decades of civil war, began to find a fragile peace. Marcus walked through the streets noticing subtle changes. The calm in the forum, the renewed focus of merchants, the disciplined order of the legions. He sensed that Rome was entering a new era, one defined not by chaos but by calculated authority, where every decision could ripple across continents. Even as Augustus solidified power, the empire's borders expanded. Soldiers marched into Germania, Hispania, and Egypt, bringing new lands, resources, and challenges under Rome's control. Livia, now older and wiser, traveled with trade caravans, witnessing the diversity of the empire firsthand. She marveled at the roads, aqueducts, and cities that connected distant peoples, understanding that Rome's greatness lay not only in conquest but in integration and administration. And yet, she also saw the suffering, the rebellions, and the limits of imperial power, understanding that even the mightiest empire was fragile beneath the surface. In the heart of the city, Marcus became a storyteller, recounting events for citizens eager to understand their history as it unfolded. He spoke of generals and senators, of wars and alliances, of triumphs and betrayals. His stories carried both excitement and caution, reminding listeners that history was not only written by the victors, but also by those who lived, suffered, and dreamed amidst the empire's rise and fall. As Augustus' reign progressed, Rome entered a period known as the Pax Romana, a time of relative peace and prosperity. Roads stretched across continents, trade flourished, and culture thrived. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Generals eyed the throne, corruption crept into governance, and the delicate balance of power required constant vigilance. Marcus and Livia, now witnesses to decades of history, understood that Rome's story was never static. It was a living force, shaped by human ambition, courage, and folly alike. And so, the stage was set for the next centuries of Roman history, from Augustus' calculated rise to the battles that would shape provinces and cities, from the lives of ordinary citizens to the ambitions of emperors. The empire's story was unfolding in all its complexity. Every character, every choice, every act of courage or betrayal contributed to a narrative larger than any single individual. Rome was not merely a city or a government, it was a civilization in motion, its destiny intertwined with the lives of those bold enough to live within it, to shape it, and ultimately to witness its eventual decline. The empire under Augustus had stabilized, but Rome was far from a city of idle streets. Generals marched, governors managed distant provinces, and the citizens lived under laws that were at once protective and oppressive. Marcus, now a young man, walked the streets with the eyes of a historian and the heart of a citizen. He had seen the Republic crumble, witnessed Caesar's rise and fall, and now watched as Augustus molded Rome into an empire that would last centuries. Yet he understood that beneath the grandeur, the seeds of future turmoil were quietly taking root. In distant Germania, legions faced harsh winters and relentless resistance. Titus, still alive in Marcus' memories as the embodiment of loyalty and courage, had long since passed, but the lessons of discipline and strategy remained. Soldiers wrote letters home, describing battles and hardships, their words capturing both heroism and suffering. Livia, now traveling further across the provinces, documented these tales, ensuring that the lives of ordinary men and women were not lost amidst the stories of emperors and senators. She saw the empire as a living organism, one that thrived on the loyalty of its people, yet depended on the strength and ambition of its rulers. Under Augustus, the empire reached unprecedented levels of prosperity. Roads connected Rome to far-off lands, aqueducts brought fresh water to the cities, and grand temples rose to honor gods and emperors alike. Trade flourished from the sands of Egypt to the forests of Britannia, and culture thrived with poets, philosophers, and artists contributing to a civilization that seemed eternal. Marcus recorded plays in the Forum, listened to philosophers debate, and marveled at architecture that reflected both power and beauty. Rome's influence stretched across continents, shaping laws, governance, and culture in ways no one had imagined a century earlier. Yet, even in times of peace, tension simmered. Emperors came and went, each leaving a mark, some glorious, some catastrophic. Tiberius, strict and secretive, ruled with a wary hand. Caligula, unpredictable and cruel, brought fear to the streets of Rome. Claudius expanded the empire into Britannia, demonstrating the possibilities of governance and conquest. Marcus and Livia watched from the sidelines, yet their understanding of history deepened with each reign. They saw that emperors were not invincible, that power required vigilance, and that even the mightiest ruler could be undone by ambition, betrayal, or miscalculation. The citizens felt both awe and apprehension. Crowds cheered in the amphitheaters, marveling at gladiators battling for survival, while whispers circulated about political assassinations and secret plots within the palaces. Marcus recorded it all, noting how the empire's strength was intertwined with human nature, its victories inseparable from ambition, its wealth balanced against corruption, and its expansion shadowed by unrest in distant provinces. Livia, ever observant, chronicled stories of women and families whose lives were shaped by imperial decisions, understanding that history was not only about battles and emperors, but also the daily existence of millions across the empire. Under Hadrian, Rome's borders were fortified. The famous wall in Britannia stood as both protection and symbol of control. Marcus walked near the construction sites, witnessing soldiers laboring under harsh conditions, engineers planning with precision, and the growing tension between the need for security and the desire for expansion. Livia traveled with trade caravans, seeing how commerce and culture bridged provinces, even as military campaigns reminded everyone that the empire's power depended on constant vigilance. Rome was vast, magnificent, and fragile all at once. Time marched on, and the empire faced challenges it could not ignore. Economic strain, political corruption, and external threats tested the foundations built by Augustus. Marcus, now older and wise beyond his years, noted how each emperor's decisions rippled across centuries. Commodus' reign brought decadence and cruelty. Severus strengthened the military but destabilized governance. Diocletian attempted reforms to save the empire, dividing responsibilities to maintain order. Marcus and Livia observed these changes with a mix of hope and concern, understanding that greatness demanded not only strength but wisdom, and that human flaws could undermine even the most powerful systems. The division of the empire into eastern and western halves under Diocletian set the stage for centuries of both prosperity and conflict. Constantinople emerged as a new capital, a beacon of power and culture, while Rome, though revered, began to show cracks in its foundations. Marcus walked the Forum one last time, feeling the weight of centuries, reflecting on how the city had transformed from a republic of citizens, soldiers to an empire ruled by emperors whose names would echo through history. Livia, now an elder, traveled to distant provinces one final time, seeing firsthand the diversity and complexity of Rome's reach, understanding that an empire as vast as this could never be entirely controlled, only guided. As the Western Empire faced increasing pressure from Germanic tribes and internal strife, Marcus documented stories of ordinary citizens defending their homes, soldiers battling invasions, and leaders attempting reforms. He saw the human side of collapse, the fear, resilience, and courage of people striving to maintain their lives amid chaos. Livia recorded similar tales, understanding that the empire's strength was as much in its citizens as in its emperors. Rome's decline was gradual, marked not by a single event, but by the cumulative weight of mismanagement, ambition, and external threats. Finally, in 476 AD, the unthinkable occurred. The Western Roman Empire fell to Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain who deposed the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus. Marcus, who had lived through centuries of Rome's triumphs and tragedies, reflected on the city that had risen from humble beginnings to dominate the known world. He recorded the final words of senators, the stories of soldiers and citizens, and the echoes of emperors whose ambition had shaped history. Livia, now a witness to the empire's end, understood that while Rome as a political entity had fallen, its culture, laws, and influence would endure for millennia. The empire's story, from Augustus to Romulus Augustulus, was one of human ambition, courage, and folly. Marcus and Livia, two ordinary citizens who had witnessed extraordinary events, represented the enduring spirit of Rome. They had seen how leadership, loyalty, and human nature intertwined to create greatness, how ambition could build and destroy, and how the lives of millions shaped the destiny of a civilization. Rome's fall was not the end of history, it was the transformation of an idea, a legacy that would echo through centuries, influencing governments, culture, and the very way humanity understood power and civilization. And so, as the dust settled over the Forum and the banners of foreign kings rose where Roman eagles once soared, the story of Rome remained alive, in the hearts and minds of those who remembered, in the writings of chroniclers like Marcus and the tales carried by travelers like Livia. The empire endured. It lived in law, in architecture, in culture, and in the stories of every generation that came after, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a city and a people whose influence would shape the world forever. As the sun set over the ruins of a city that had once ruled the known world, silence fell over Rome. The Forum, once alive with the shouts of senators, the clang of swords, and the laughter of children, now stood as a monument to centuries of triumph and tragedy. Marcus, now an old man, walked slowly among the fallen columns, his eyes tracing the scars of time etched into stone. Livia stood beside him, her gaze distant, reflecting on the lives, the ambitions, and the dreams that had filled these streets for generations. Rome was gone, yet it had never truly vanished. Its spirit lived on, in the roads that still connected distant lands, in the laws that shaped nations, in the stories of courage, betrayal, and perseverance that would echo through the ages. The empire had risen from a humble state to dominate continents, and even in its fall, it left a legacy that no conqueror could erase. Marcus whispered to Livia, "History is not about the end of a city or an emperor. It is about the people who lived, who dreamed, who dared to shape the world." And in that quiet moment, the true power of Rome was revealed, not in its armies or its emperors, but in its enduring influence on humanity itself. From Augustus to Romulus Augustulus, the empire had been a mirror of human ambition, a canvas of triumph and folly, a testament to the heights we can reach and the lessons we must remember. Every stone, every inscription, every story was a reminder that greatness is never permanent, but its echoes can last forever. As night fell, the stars shone above, indifferent to empires, yet casting their light over a world forever changed by Rome. The legacies of Marcus and Livia, and countless lives like theirs, carried forward the soul of an empire that had dared to dream bigger than any city before it. Rome had fallen, yes, but its story would never end. It lived in every law, every language, every corner of civilization shaped by its vision. And as viewers, as witnesses of this grand saga, we too are part of its story, reminded that history is not just a tale of the past, but a guide for the future, a mirror of ambition, courage, and the eternal human spirit.